Hi, my name is Carlos and I'm new to your channel, but I've been really drawn to the last story you share. I've got one that I think you and your viewers might find interesting, something that my great-grandfather experienced during World War II in the Philippines. It's a story that's been passed down in my family, and it's as real as it gets. I hope you find it as chilling as we do. Here's what happened. The air was thick with humidity as my family gathered in the living room. It was one of those rare nights when everyone was together, listening to stories from the past. My great-grandfather, Lolo Miguel, was seated in his favorite armchair, a soft glow from the lamp casting shadows on his weathered face. His eyes, though clouded with age, still held a sharpness, a remnant of the man who had lived through unimaginable hardships. "Tell us a story, Lolo," I asked, eager for another tale from his time during World War II in the Philippines. Lolo Miguel leaned back, his eyes narrowing as if sifting through memories. After a long pause, he spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "You want a story? I'll tell you one. But this is not a story for the faint of heart. It's about something that happened during the war, something I've never told anyone." We all leaned in closer, the room falling silent except for the distant hum of the cicadas outside. "It was 1944, Lolo began. I was just a young man, barely 20, but already I had seen too much. The Japanese occupation was brutal, and we fought as guerrillas in the jungles, using whatever we could find to resist them." He paused, taking a deep breath as if steeling himself for what was to come. "One night our commander received intelligence about a Japanese outpost deep in the jungle. It was a small garrison but well hidden, and it was crucial that we neutralize it. We were a small unit, 5 of us in total. We set out at dusk, moving silently through the dense undergrowth. I could almost feel the oppressive heat and the thick foliage closing in as Lolo described their journey. They moved quickly, their senses heightened, every rustle of leaves, every distant animal cry putting them on edge. We walked for hours, deeper into the jungle than we had ever been. The trees grew thicker, and the darkness seemed to swallow us whole, but we pressed on knowing what was at stake. As we neared the outpost, something felt wrong, Lolo said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The jungle, usually alive with the sounds of insects and animals, had gone completely silent. Not a single bird, not even the wind, made a sound. It was as if the very air was holding its breath. Lolo's words sent a shiver down my spine, and I could see the same unease reflected in the faces of my family. "We found the outpost, or what was left of it," he continued. "The structure was partially hidden by the trees, but we could see that it had been attacked. The walls were riddled with bullet holes, and there was blood. So much blood. But there were no bodies, no sign of the Japanese soldiers who were supposed to be stationed there." Lolo's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass of water. After taking a sip, he continued. "We searched the area, moving carefully, but the place was deserted. Then we found the first body, a Filipino villager, a woman. She was lying face down in the dirt, her hands bound and her throat had been slit. The room was deathly quiet as Lolo described the gruesome scene. I could almost see the image in my mind, the horror of it, and I felt my stomach turn. But that wasn't the worst of it," Lolo said, his voice now barely above a whisper. "We found more bodies, all villagers, all killed in the same brutal manner. And then, we found him." Lolo paused, his eyes distant, as if reliving the moment. "In the back of the outpost, there was a small makeshift cell. Inside was a man, Filipino like us, but his clothes were in tatters, and he was covered in dirt and blood. He was alive, but barely. We tried to get him to talk, to tell us what had happened, but all he could do was mutter one word, over and over. Sila, Sila. I felt a chill run down my spine at the way Lolo said the word, as if it carried some dark hidden meaning. We didn't know what he meant, Lolo continued, but we knew we couldn't leave him there. We cut him loose and started to head back, but that's when we heard it, the sound that still haunts me to this day. Lolo's eyes locked onto mine, and I could see the fear in them, raw and real. It was a scream, unlike anything I've ever heard. It came from deep within the jungle, a scream so full of pain and terror that it made my blood run cold. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. He shook his head slowly, as if trying to shake off the memory. We didn't wait to find out what made that sound. We ran, carrying the man between us, but the jungle seemed to close in around us. The path we had come down was gone, the trees twisted and unfamiliar. We were lost. Lolo's voice trembled as he continued. We ran for what felt like hours, but the jungle was like a maze, every direction leading us deeper into the darkness. And then, one by one, we started to hear it again, the screams, coming from all around us, getting closer. My heart pounded in my chest as Lolo spoke, the tension in the room almost unbearable. We stumbled upon a clearing, and that's when we saw them. The bodies of the villagers, hung from the trees like trophies, their lifeless eyes staring down at us. We knew then that we were being hunted. Lolo's hand tightened into a fist, his knuckles white. We had no choice but to keep moving. We didn't know who or what was out there, but we knew we had to get out. The man we had rescued, he kept whispering, "Sila, Sila," and pointing into the darkness. He paused, taking a shaky breath. It wasn't until we finally broke through the tree line, the first light of dawn breaking through the horizon, that we realized. Only 3 of us had made it out. We never spoke of what happened that night, Lolo said, his voice filled with sorrow. The man we rescued died before we could get him to safety, and the other 2 men, they were never found. It was as if the jungle had swallowed them whole. Lolo looked around the room, his eyes haunted. I've carried that night with me for my entire life, the memory of those screams, of the bodies hanging in the trees. We never found out what happened to the villagers, who, or what, killed them. But I'll never forget the terror I felt in that jungle, the sense that something far more dangerous than the Japanese soldiers was out there, watching us, waiting. The room was silent, the weight of Lolo's story pressing down on us like a suffocating blanket. None of us dared to speak, the horror of what he had shared leaving us stunned. Finally, Lolo leaned forward, his eyes meeting mine. "Remember this," he said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "There are things in this world, things that can't be explained, that are more terrifying than anything you could imagine. And sometimes it's better not to know the truth." As we all sat in silence, trying to process Lolo's story, the power suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness. We jumped, startled by the sudden change, our nerves already on edge from the tale we had just heard. For a moment, the only sound was our heavy breathing, the darkness pressing in around us. Then, from the far corner of the room came a noise, a soft shuffling sound, like something moving across the floor. My heart raced as I squinted into the darkness, trying to see what it was. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was right next to us. And then, with a loud crash, something fell from the shelf, sending us all screaming in fright. The lights flickered back on, and we saw what had caused the noise, a stack of old books, knocked over by the shifting of the floor. We all laughed nervously, trying to shake off the fear, but the tension lingered, the story still fresh in our minds. Lolo didn't laugh. He just sat there, his eyes fixed on the spot where the books had fallen, his face pale. "Some stories," he said quietly, "should never be told." Even now, years later, I can still hear Lolo's voice in my head, his words echoing in my mind. The fear he felt that night in the jungle, the terror that followed him for the rest of his life, it stayed with me too. I never forgot the story he told, and I never went back to that part of the Philippines. Because deep down, I knew that whatever was out there, whatever hunted my great-grandfather and his comrades, was still waiting. And it was better not to know. I know I'm new to your channel, but I really wanted to share this story with you. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't from our imagination, they're from real life. Thanks for listening, and I hope you keep sharing these incredible stories.